The sun was a hammer that never stopped striking the earth. In the southern reaches of the Arizona Territory, the world felt stripped down to three things only: heat, silence, and sharp edges. The ground was not soft soil, but cracked alkali and broken stone, littered with thorny mesquite and cruel cholla cactus, waiting for anything weak enough to bleed. The sky above was bleached white, so bright it hurt to look at. Nothing moved except the trembling waves of heat that made distant mountains shimmer like ghosts. High above, vultures circled slowly, patient and certain. They knew this land better than any mapmaker. They knew that life here was fragile and short. Clara walked through the furnace like someone already half gone. She was 25, but the last 3 days had carved years into her face. Her dress, yet once a neat calico meant for Sunday mornings, was now torn and gray with dust. The hem dragged in shredded strips. One shoe was missing. Her lips were cracked. Every step looked painful. She stumbled, catching her boot on a buried root, and fell hard to her knees. The ground burned her palms, but that pain barely registered. The real agony radiated from her hips and thighs like fire. She gasped, trying to pull her legs together, but the movement sent a sharp bolt of pain through her body. A sob escaped her throat. She could not close her legs. The swelling and raw flesh made it impossible. She knelt there trembling, knees apart, shame rising hotter than the sun. Even alone in the desert, with no eyes watching but vultures and lizards, she felt exposed. "Get up," she whispered to herself. "If you stay here, well, he wins." The name rose in her mind like poison. Harlan. She remembered her father's parlor back in Missouri. Pipe smoke, quiet voices. The agreement made over her head like a business deal. Harlan was a good match, they said. A man with land out west, security, stability. She remembered the journey west and the first sight of the ranch. Isolated. Quiet. Too quiet. And then she remembered how fast his mask slipped. He had not wanted a wife. He had wanted ownership. Clara forced herself upright. Every movement hurt. She took a step, then another. She tried to keep her thighs apart so the skin would not rub together. Humiliation burned through her, but survival pushed her forward. The memory of the barn came without warning. The smell of hay. The darkness. The silence after the baby that never cried. And her daughter had been born still, and something inside Clara had broken with her. Harlan had blamed her, called her weak, called her ruined. "You are no good to me like this," he had said. She remembered the iron next. Heavy, cold, unforgiving. Shackles meant for livestock, not a person. He had chained her in the barn. The cuffs dug into her flesh. And worse, he had rigged a spreader bar to keep her legs apart, leaving her trapped and humiliated for weeks. She had lived like an animal. 3 nights ago, a drunken mistake left the barn door unlocked. She had crawled. She had filed at the pins with a rusted tool until her fingers bled. She escaped with nothing but her torn dress and the wounds the iron left behind. Now the sky was darkening. Purple bruises spread across the horizon. Thunder growled in the distance. A storm was coming. But she saw the edge of a canyon ahead and pushed herself toward it. Maybe there would be water. Maybe there would be shade. Maybe she could simply lie down and let the desert take her. Her legs finally gave out near the rim. She fell among rocks and scrub, her cheek pressed against stone. Let him find a corpse, she thought, as darkness closed in. A mile away, Nichi stopped walking. He was a shadow moving through red rock, A man shaped by the desert itself. Apache, early 30s, long dark hair tied back with red cloth, buckskin clothing worn smooth by years under open sky. A rifle rested easily in his hand. He listened to the wind. The smell of rain was strong. Then he looked down at the ground. Tracks. Not clean footsteps. Drag marks. Stumbles. Someone injured. Someone desperate. He crouched, reading the earth like a book. He should have turned away. Trouble lived in tracks like these. White settlers meant danger. Soldiers meant death. But the trail pulled him forward. Months earlier, soldiers had attacked his winter camp while he scouted alone. By the time he returned, his people were gone. The lodges burned. His wife and small daughter lost to smoke and gunfire. Since then, he wandered alone, carrying silence like a second skin. He followed the trail toward the canyon as rain began to fall. Fat drops struck the dust. Then he saw her. At first, she looked like discarded cloth caught between stones. Then the wind moved her torn dress, and he saw pale skin. A woman. He approached cautiously, rifle ready. She lay face down, motionless. He crouched and touched her shoulder. She exploded awake with a gasp, scrambling backward in terror. What her eyes were wild. She tried to pull her knees together, but her body betrayed her. She whimpered, shaking. "No," she whispered. "Please, no more." Nichi lowered his hands, showing he meant no harm. Rain poured harder. The temperature dropped fast. If he left her, she would die. "I take you," he said in rough English. "Dry place." She shook her head. Tears mixed with mud on her cheeks. "Don't touch me." There was no time. He moved carefully, lifting her. She screamed as pain shot through her body, then went limp, fainting. He adjusted his grip, trying not to press her injured legs together. She felt too light, like someone already fading. He carried her down a hidden trail into the canyon, reaching a small alcove sheltered from wind and rain. Inside, he laid her gently on the sand, keeping her legs in the position that hurt least. He built a small fire. Smokeless. Careful. When she stirred, he gave her water. She swallowed weakly. His eyes moved to her torn clothing. The smell of infection hung in the damp air. The wounds needed cleaning. He pulled a knife from his belt. Her eyes widened in fear. "No. What are you doing?" "Medicine," he said quietly. "Need see." She trembled, whispering through tears. "I can't close my legs. It hurts." She said it like a confession, like a shame she expected him to judge. Nichi paused. He met her gaze. "I do not hurt you," he said slowly. With precise movements, he cut the ruined fabric away. The cloth fell aside. He froze. He had seen battle wounds before. Bullet holes, knife cuts, burned flesh. But this was different. The marks on her legs told a story of cruelty. The deep, infected trenches circled her ankles where iron had eaten into skin. Raw abrasions ran along her thighs. The damage spoke of restraint, of deliberate torture. He understood. Someone had done this to her on purpose. Clara turned her face away, sobbing silently, expecting disgust. Instead, Nichi's jaw tightened. Something long dead inside him stirred. Rage, hot and sharp. He put away his knife, reached for clean cloth and herbs, and knelt beside her. His face stayed calm, but his hands moved with careful gentleness. "Close your eyes," he said softly. She obeyed. Outside, thunder crashed, and rain hammered the canyon walls. Inside the small shelter, Firelight flickered over two strangers, bound together by pain. As Nichi began cleaning her wounds, the storm raged on. But for the first time in years, Clara felt something she barely recognized. Safety. Morning came cold and pale after the storm. Light spilled slowly over the canyon walls, turning the red stone gold. Water rushed through the wash below, muddy and loud, cutting through the silence. The desert felt washed clean, but the air still carried the sharp scent of rain and sage. Clara woke to the smell of smoke. For a brief moment, she thought she was back in the barn. Her body tensed, waiting for the clank of chains. Then she opened her eyes and saw stone above her instead of timber. The memory returned. The storm. The Apache man. The cave. She tried to sit up and instantly gasped. Pain shot from her ankles through her hips. Her legs refused to move the way she wanted. "Stay," a deep voice said softly. She turned her head. Nichi sat by the fire, feeding small sticks into the flames. He looked different in daylight. His face was strong and calm, but his eyes looked tired, like someone who had lost too much sleep and too many people. "You hurt," he said quietly. Clara nodded. She tried again to pull her knees together out of instinct. Pain exploded through her groin. She winced, her legs falling back apart. Shame flooded her face. Nichi stood and came closer, but he stayed low, making himself smaller, less threatening. But he held out a tin cup filled with hot liquid. "Drink." She hesitated, then accepted it. The bitter taste of herbs filled her mouth. It soothed her throat. He gestured toward her legs. "Must clean. Poison comes if not." Clara shut her eyes. "Do what you must." He worked carefully, cleaning the wounds with water and crushed herbs. His touch was slow, deliberate. Not once did he stare at her body with hunger or judgment. He treated her injuries like a problem to be solved, not something to shame. After a long silence, he asked, "Who did this?" The question hung in the air. "My husband," she whispered. Nichi stopped for a moment. "Husband protects," he said quietly. "This enemy." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. The words broke something inside her. She began to talk without meaning to. About Missouri. About dreams of the frontier. About the baby girl who never breathed. About the pain afterward and Harlan's anger. "He said I was broken," she whispered. "He said I was useless." Nichi listened without interrupting. His hands kept working, wrapping fresh cloth around her ankles. "He chained me," she said finally. "Like livestock." Silence filled the cave. The fire cracked softly. "He is sick," Nichi said at last. "Not man." Clara looked at him. There was no pity in his face, only a deep, controlled anger. She swallowed. "What about you? Why are you alone out here?" Nichi sat back on his heels. For a long moment he said nothing. "Soldiers came," he said finally. "Winter camp. Fire. Guns." His voice was flat, like he had repeated the story only inside his head. "Wife and daughter gone. I live. They do not." Clara stared at him, her chest tightening. Two strangers from worlds that hated each other, both carrying graves inside them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once. The days passed slowly. The canyon became their world. Nichi tended her wounds morning and night. He forced her to stretch her legs, even when she cried out in pain. "Muscle gets hard," he said. "You want walk again? You push." She hated him for it sometimes, then thanked him silently later. He hunted quietly, setting snares instead of firing his rifle. They shared simple meals of rabbit and roasted roots. The desert bloomed after the rain, tiny flowers pushing stubbornly through cracks in the stone. Clara watched him move through the canyon like part of it. Calm, quiet, efficient. Something inside her began to change. The shame that had weighed her down for years started to loosen. Anger replaced it, hot and sharp. "I won't go back," she said one afternoon. Nichi looked up from sharpening his knife. "Good," he replied. "Fear is heavy. Anger walks faster." At night, the desert turned cold. One evening, the wind howled through the canyon like a living thing. Clara shivered under a thin blanket, unable to stop trembling. Without a word, Nichi crossed the fire and laid his buffalo robe over both of them. He lay beside her, careful not to touch at first. She froze. Every part of her expected pain, but he stayed still, his warmth steady beside her. Slowly she relaxed. The cold faded. She felt the rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in years, she fell asleep, feeling safe. The next morning felt different. A fragile tension hung in the air. Neither of them mentioned the closeness, but both were aware of it. Days later, and Nichi helped her stand. "Walk," he said. Her legs shook violently. She took one step, then another. Pain burned through her hips. She stumbled. He caught her before she fell. His arm wrapped around her waist, strong and steady. They froze. Her hands clutched his shoulders. She could smell smoke and sage on his skin. Their faces were inches apart. A strange flutter rose inside her chest. Not fear this time, but something softer. He set her gently back on her feet and stepped away quickly. "You stronger," he said quietly. She watched him turn away, pretending to focus on the fire. The sanctuary broke 2 days later. Nichi returned from the canyon rim with a hard expression. "Riders," he said. Cold fear filled Clara's stomach. "Who?" "White men. Soldiers. And your husband." Her breath caught. He began packing immediately. "They found trail. We leave now." She looked around the small cave that had become her refuge. It was the first safe place she had known in years. She took his hand. They climbed out of the canyon before sunrise. Nichi had hidden a small Mustang nearby. Getting Clara into the saddle was agony. She bit her lip until it bled. The journey north was brutal. Rocky hills replaced the flat desert. Nichi walked beside the horse, guiding it through dangerous trails, while Clara fought waves of pain with every step the animal took. At night, they shared the buffalo robe under a sky full of stars. They spoke quietly about dreams they once had. A home, peace, belonging. "You are not broken," Nichi told her one night. "You are iron that survived fire." The words stayed with her. The next afternoon they were spotted. Riders appeared below on a ridge. Shots cracked through the air. Bullets struck rock around them. "Ride!" Nichi shouted. The world became chaos. Horse hooves slipping on stone. Gunfire echoing across cliffs. Nichi running beside her, breath heavy. They ducked into a narrow gap between massive boulders. Silence fell, except for the sound of horses searching nearby. Voices drifted close. "They're here somewhere!" Clara pressed against the rock, trembling. Nichi stood in front of her, rifle ready, shielding her with his body. She realized then he would die for her without hesitation. The riders moved on. When the sounds finally faded, she collapsed against him. He wrapped his arms around her. "It's over," he whispered. "For now." That night they hid in the rocks without fire. The cold crept into their bones. Clara shook with leftover fear. Nichi pulled her against him, and holding her tightly. "They are just men," he murmured, "not spirits." She turned to face him in the dark. "You stayed," she whispered. "You would die for me." "I do not run anymore," he said softly. Her heart pounded. "I trust you," she said. He leaned closer slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a soft, uncertain kiss, not desperate, not forced. A question asked in silence. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "Sleep," he whispered, resting his forehead against hers. For the first time, Clara dreamed not of chains, but of open fields. Days later, they reached the small town of San Cristobal. Nichi stopped in the shelter of cottonwood trees. "I cannot go in," he said. "Too dangerous." Clara felt panic rise, but she nodded. She walked into town alone, dressed in a borrowed blue calico dress. Yet the stares began immediately. Whispers followed her. She found Dr. Vance, who examined her injuries with professional care. For the first time, someone told her the truth. "You are not ruined," he said gently. "You were hurt, but you can heal." Clara wept with relief, but when she sought help from the sheriff and the preacher, they turned on her. They believed Harlan. They called her hysterical. Worse. She left shaking with rage and fear. A woman named Elena found her near the river and quietly offered shelter. That night, Nichi joined her in Elena's small shack. They were finally safe again, hidden from the town's judgment. The days there were quiet. Healing continued. Clara's strength returned. And one rainy night, lying close together on the narrow bed, she reached for him. "I choose you," she whispered. He hesitated, afraid of hurting her. "You won't," she said. Their love was careful, gentle, filled with reverence instead of force. For the first time, Clara felt her body belong to herself. She cried softly afterward, not from pain, but from relief. "I am alive," she whispered. The peace didn't last. 3 days later, Elena burst into the shack, breathless. "He's here," she said. "Harlan, and men with guns. They are hunting you." Nichi was already packing. "We leave now." They slipped away into the dark toward the mountains, riding hard through cold night air. Higher and higher they climbed. When dawn came, Nichi spoke quietly. "There is an Apache camp ahead. They may not welcome us." Clara swallowed her fear. "We have no choice." They reached the camp by late afternoon. Suspicious eyes watched them. An old leader named Nana allowed them one night only. The tension in the camp was thick. Then, at sunset, shouting echoed from the ridge above. Harlan's voice boomed down. "I want my wife." Guns were raised. Fear exploded through the camp. Nichi handed Clara a rifle and pushed her behind a rock. "Stay down," he ordered. Gunfire erupted. Bullets struck stone. Men shouted. Chaos swallowed everything. Clara saw Harlan moving closer, pistol in hand, with the same look in his eyes she remembered from the barn. Something snapped inside her. She stood up. "No!" she screamed, her voice echoing across the canyon. Both sides stopped in shock. "I am not your property!" she shouted. She lifted her skirt to show the scars on her legs. "Look what he did to me!" Silence spread. Even the hired guns hesitated. Harlan's face twisted with rage. He raised his pistol. Nichi lunged forward. The gun fired. Nichi fell. A single rifle shot cracked from another direction. Harlan froze, red blooming on his chest. He collapsed into the dust. The fight ended instantly. Clara dropped beside Nichi, pressing her hands against his bleeding shoulder. "Stay with me," she sobbed. He opened his eyes, weak but alive. "You spoke loud," he whispered with a faint smile. The old leader Nana stepped forward. He watching her differently now. "Take him to the fire," he said. "We remove the bullet." As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Clara helped Nichi walk back toward the campfires. For the first time, she did not feel like prey. She felt like someone who had finally fought back. Gunsmoke drifted slowly into the darkening sky as the canyon fell silent. The fight was over, but the air still felt heavy with danger. Harlan lay motionless in the dust, his voice gone forever. The men who had followed him fled over the ridge, leaving only echoes behind. Clara knelt beside Nichi, her hands pressed against his shoulder. Blood stained her fingers, warm and frighteningly bright. Her heart pounded as she whispered his name again and again. "Stay with me." Nichi's eyes opened slightly. Pain etched his face, but he managed a weak smile. You stood," he murmured. "You were strong." She shook her head, tears falling. "Don't talk." The old Apache leader, Nana, stepped closer, studying both of them. His expression softened just a little. "Bring him to the fire," he said. "He fights for people today." They carried Nichi into the camp. The medicine woman worked quickly, removing the bullet while Clara held him steady. He gritted his teeth, but never cried out. When it was done, he leaned back, exhausted, but alive. That night, the camp sat quiet. No celebration, only survival. Nana came to the fire. "The white man is dead," he said, "but his people will come. Soldiers will ask questions. You cannot stay long." Nichi nodded slowly. He understood. Clara felt the truth settle heavy in her chest. There was no place left for them in the world they had known. 2 days later, with Nichi's wound wrapped tight, they left the camp before sunrise. They rode north. The mountains swallowed them. Days turned into a slow march of stone and pine. The air grew colder, thinner. Snow clung to shaded cliffs. Clara walked beside the horse when Nichi grew weak, supporting him when the trail became steep. Neither spoke much. They were too tired. Then one afternoon they reached a hidden valley. It was narrow and wild, surrounded by high ridges that blocked the world outside. A stream cut through the middle, clear and cold. Tall grass moved with the wind. Nichi stopped and looked around. "Here," he said softly. Clara stared at the valley. It wasn't soft or welcoming. It was rough and stubborn, but it was hidden. It could be theirs. They began to build. The first weeks were hard, beyond anything Clara had known. They slept under pine branches while Nichi chopped trees with one arm still healing. Clara stripped bark and hauled water until her hands blistered raw. Slowly, a cabin rose from the earth. Crooked, rough, but strong. The first night they slept inside, wind rattling the walls. Clara lay awake, listening to Nichi breathe beside her. "This is ours," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "No chains here." Summer came. They planted a small garden near the stream. Corn, beans, squash. They guarded it from deer and crows like treasure. Clara's body continued to heal. The angry wounds faded into pale scars. The burning pain slowly disappeared. One afternoon, she stood by the stream washing clothes. She straightened up and froze. Her legs were together, while she looked down in disbelief. For months she had walked with a painful, wide stance. Now her knees touched without pain. A laugh burst from her chest, mixed with tears. Nichi rushed over, worried. "What happened?" She pointed at her legs, laughing through tears. "Look!" He stared. Understanding filled his eyes. "You are whole," he said softly. She shook her head. "Not whole, but healing." He stepped into the water and kissed her gently. The moment felt quiet and sacred. A victory no one else would understand. Yet the past still followed them. At night, Nichi sometimes woke shouting, trapped in memories of the soldiers and burning lodges. Clara held him until the shaking stopped. Other nights, she woke clawing at her ankles, feeling phantom iron. Nichi would wrap his hands around her scars and whisper, "No chains, only skin." Together, they learned how to sleep again. Seasons turned. Their love grew steady and deep, not rushed or desperate. Every touch was chosen. Every moment built trust where fear once lived. Then, people began to arrive. A black family who had been driven from their homestead. An old Mexican couple whose sheep were stolen by ranchers. A quiet prospector who had nowhere else to go. Outcasts found their way to the hidden valley. No one asked questions. No one judged. They worked, shared food, and slowly became a strange new family, built from people the world had rejected. Winter came hard, snow piling high around the cabin. During one long night, Clara realized her body felt different. Weeks passed, and the truth became undeniable. She was pregnant. Fear hit her like cold water. She remembered the stillborn child, and the pain, the loss. "I can't go through that again," she whispered one evening. Nichi knelt before her, his hands resting gently on her waist. "This is not the barn," he said. "You are not alone." As spring arrived, her belly grew. The baby kicked strong and lively. The valley rallied around her. The old Mexican woman taught her herbal remedies. Thomas Jefferson carved a cradle. For the first time, Clara felt hope instead of fear. Late summer painted the valley gold. One evening, she sat in the cabin doorway, heavy with child, shelling beans while Nichi repaired a fence nearby. She shifted, laughing suddenly. "What?" he asked, smiling. She looked down at her round stomach. Her legs were spread wide to make room for it. She laughed harder, tears filling her eyes. "Look at me," she said softly. "I can't close my legs." Nichi walked over slowly and knelt in front of her. He placed his hands gently on her knees, then on her belly. The baby kicked against his palm. He looked up at her, eyes shining. "Life," he whispered. "Not shame, not pain, not chains. Life." The wind moved through the trees as the sun dipped low over the valley. Smoke rose from nearby chimneys. Laughter drifted from the small community they had built. They were still outsiders to the world beyond the mountains, a still without law or protection. But here, in this hidden place, they belonged. Clara leaned back against the doorway, Nichi beside her, his arm around her shoulders. She carried scars that would never disappear. He carried ghosts that would never fully leave. But they were standing, together. And for now, that was enough.